Brady from Silicon Valley Bank. Thanks, Gerald.
Thank you, Tracy. That's a very kind welcome. And I have to admit before we start, I have a Portuguese grandmother, but I can't speak a word of Portuguese, so I got the English genes, I'm afraid. But it's great to see you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's a great honor to be here. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, but as we go through the slides, if you've got questions, put your hand up, we'll deal with them in real time. And I'll run through some data that may be hopefully relevant for you. Now, you're probably wondering, why is a British guy who lives in Silicon Valley talking about innovation? Because it's not the obvious connection, not being an American guy from the Valley. So my personal journey was I had run sales for Yahoo when it was founded in Europe 16 years ago, joined a venture capital firm, 3i, in London, moved to Silicon Valley in 2000 to help set up the office for 3i in London, and never left. So I joined Silicon Valley Bank 3 years ago. We had been a client of the bank, so I'd known them a long time. And it's all about this. This is what drives the bank. We were founded by entrepreneurs 30 years ago, next year is our 30th anniversary, who were frustrated that the existing banks didn't serve the needs of startup entrepreneurs. They couldn't even open checking accounts, yet alone get a loan. So they said there's got to be a better way of doing this. And they did the entrepreneurial thing and went and founded a bank. And the smartest thing they probably did was call it Silicon Valley Bank. Now, 10 years ago when we started our adventure moving into Europe, we were pretty worried. Would the name Silicon Valley Bank actually be a good thing or a bad thing for us in Europe? And the great thing is Silicon Valley is more than just a place on a map. It's a state of mind. And the name has worked really well for us around the world. Now, we're not as global as Telefonica, but we're in many of the key innovation centers around the world today. And what you can see here is how the bank has developed over 30 years. We were the smallest bank when we were founded. We were then number 11,500th in the country in terms of banks. There are 8,000 banks in America today. We're the 50th largest bank in America. We have grown our asset base pretty significantly in the last year. We're about 40 billion of assets today. We're fortunate to bank over 70% of all of the venture-backed startups in America today. And a great story is 1987, a husband and wife team walk in, open an account with us, and we lend them $50,000. That was Cisco. Cisco, 3 years later, were doing $1 billion in revenue. 27 years on, we're still one of 5 banks in the world for Cisco. So we've been very fortunate to work with amazing technology companies, and our growth has followed the growth of these companies over the years. We've spread across America over the 80s and 90s, and then internationally we started expanding. We opened our full branch in the UK, and we're lending across Europe today. In South America, as some of you may know, we have made a couple of fund investments in Brazil. We lent to our first company in Uruguay. It was a Sequoia-backed company. So we're actually present in South America. We'd love to be doing more there. And then across many of the other innovation centers, Israel, India, China, and we just signed a joint venture in Russia earlier this year as well. So we're growing. We'd love to do more. We need your help to help, as we grow around the world as well. And our position in the marketplace is all about helping make connections. That's what we do. Our strapline used to be, we know people. It's very much at the heart of the innovation economy. We sit between the corporates and the companies, the geographies, and we're there to leverage the connections with the venture community. And each part of that ecosystem is part of our network that we bring to bear. And so that's probably the single biggest thing that I would say is important as you think about what you're doing in each of the geographies you're present in today, is leveraging the network and building the network. And I think you're all doing that today. And what you're doing at Wayra is a great example of actually being at the forefront of this. But Silicon Valley is not an overnight success story. And you could argue that it really started with the foundation of Hewlett-Packard. But it probably goes back longer than that. And you could argue that Levi's changed the fashion industry, developing jeans in San Francisco in the 1870s. Silicon Valley's always been about doing things differently. The gold rush mentality was different. And the Valley has always thought about being different. So one thing, bear in mind, this does not happen overnight. You know, a lot of people think they can build the Valley in each country overnight, and our lesson is it takes time to build those networks. But it will happen faster because you've got 60 years worth of history to look at the lessons from each of the countries and what the Valley has done. And the hardest thing, I think my experience has been in the Valley to see other countries do is admit it's okay to fail. Now, I came from the UK. It's really not a good thing in the UK to fail today. So to the entrepreneurs in the room, be brave, be bold, grab the opportunity, and if it doesn't work out the first time, do what they do in the Valley. Do it second, third, fourth time. Keep iterating. It will happen. Do not give up, because that's the lesson of the Valley. And to the investors in the room, particularly those outside of the Valley, the guy who failed will have learned something. Think of that as an investment on someone else's dime, because they do learn from that. And don't write them off. There's a quote that says, it's not the entrepreneur, it's the idea. And if it doesn't work first time, it will the second, third, fourth time. So bear with them. And there are lots of examples of people in the Valley. Twitter is a good example. This was their third effort before they finally caught onto one. We're also clearly living in different times. The macroeconomy around the world is challenging. We can't do business like we used to, and I think that's true for everyone here. So think differently out there, and every entrepreneur in this room is thinking differently, trying to change the mindset of the companies that they're working with. And I'm so impressed that Telefonica is doing this, because this is really putting money behind a great idea. And I think Wayra is a great example of taking innovation from a big company and deploying it around the world. And so applause to the folks at Telefonica and Wayra for being brave and doing this. So just a little bit here in terms of how we see the world of innovation capital. And I think a lot of people perceive that venture capital is the be-all and end-all of how to get a company funded. And that's clearly changing. If you look at the weight of venture capital here in America today, we're on track for roughly about 20 billion coming from VCs. Now that number does not include what's coming from corporates. Corporate venture groups this year are going to invest about 5.6 billion. But that's just the money coming from the corporate venture group. There's a lot of money coming from corporates outside of the venture group, if you think of all of the money that's coming from Wayra into the ecosystem. So we think that's probably closer to $10 billion coming from corporates, and it's growing. And if you put that in context of US corporate R&D, it's 3 or 4% of R&D money is going into venture. It's growing. Venture delivers 3 to 4 times the number of patents per dollar deployed for a corporate. So it's definitely a growth opportunity there. And then in America, government is a huge driver of the venture capital ecosystem. $75 billion of this is Department of Defense, but that's been a driver of spin-out technologies. And then the angel capital community accounts for $20 billion today. It's as big as venture. So as you think about your own countries and the entrepreneurs in the room, how do you build that angel network? Is there the angel groups there? Have you got the high net worth individuals that'll take that bold step of the initial seed money? And if you don't have it, build it. Find those people that will be prepared to build that angel network, because they are the first dollars in. And that's a really key thing, building that angel ecosystem. And then the newest form of capital coming into the marketplace here in America today is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is almost 10% of the venture capital industry today. So this is the likes of Kickstarter, etc. Now, this is going to probably explode quite significantly in January, because the Jobs Act will change the legality of crowdfunding, which today you have to be a qualified investor in America, and it'll actually open up who can invest in early stage companies. So this crowdfunding, Kickstarter, angel list is really a growth area for people and entrepreneurs to look at. So again, as you think about who can you raise money from, the sources of capital are greater today than any time in the last 30 years, and it's growing. One of the things that we're always asked, because we bank so many companies, is do we see any slowdown in startup formation? Now, these are the real numbers of companies in the Bay Area that we've started banking this year. So we're on track today for about 750 new startups in the Bay Area opening an account with us. And it's probably closer to 1,500 in America. Now, we're only 75% of the economy, and these are companies that have come to us that have not yet raised any institutional venture money. We're up about 10% from last year in the number of new startups. We see no slowdown. So if you take one message away, we see no slowdown in startups. And that's a really important message, because a lot of the press is saying Series A slump, Series B slump, fundraising's going down, and we don't see it. And we don't see it on the dollars either. And here, this is an eye chart, but I'll leave the slides, will be made available. This is the real dollars coming in to the bank in Silicon Valley for Series A and seed stage companies. And we brought in 141 million in new deposits. So we capture every dollar that's coming in, and we know where that money's coming from. And you can see here that clean tech and life sciences has been very challenging. But software is very, very strong. And as you can see at the top here, 86% of all of the money is going to consumer or enterprise software companies. And that's 76% of all of the companies. So it's a very strong area. And the other thing, particularly for the Telefonica folks in the room, half of all these companies are building mobile first. That's a real shift. So if they're building even an enterprise application, the platform of choice is mobile first for half of all the companies. And here, this is how the companies break down by industry sectors. So you can see that consumer internet companies today are about half of all of the new startups that we've banked this year. The thing that's surprising is look at hardware. Most people will tell you hardware is dead. There is no money going into semiconductors. But it's 4% of all of the startups that we've banked this year. Hardware has not gone away, and the costs of doing a hardware startup are coming down like it's coming down in every other sector. Clean tech is the sector that's had the most challenging time this year. But we see very strong growth in enterprise software, particularly driven by big data companies, cybersecurity, mobile data, mobile applications. And then in terms of where the funding is going across the country, you can see that the early stage venture-backed companies are accounting for about 1/3 of all the money. And if you look at what happened in 08, 09, that's where the growth of the... Okay, there we go. You can see in 08, 09, it was the growth of the super angel that really changed where capital was coming from, because that inflection point is driven by the likes of Dave McClure, Jeff Clavier, etc., who came into the marketplace, operationally experienced executives who started putting money into the marketplace, and that has been the catalyst for early stage to really grow in America today. Now, this happens to be a rugby match that I went to 2 weeks ago, and I've got to imagine that for O2, this was probably one of the best sponsorship deals they have ever done, because this was the first time that the England team beat New Zealand in a decade. But for the entrepreneurs in the room, this is about your job is to make an impact. It's to make an impact today, it's to make an impact with your customers, it's to make an impact with your investors. So when you talk to investors, ask them, are you about impact investing or venture capital investing? Because there's a difference. And I think it's all about making an impact. And it might take 3 years, it might take 5 years, it might take 10 years. But think of yourselves as the entrepreneurs in the room about impact startups. Are you going to impact the markets that you're in? And then my final slide, reiterating the point here, Silicon Valley is a state of mind. If you think of each of the geographies that you're in, you have the core elements already in your countries and in your cities. Great universities, corporates active in each of your marketplaces. You've got lawyers, you've got accountants, and the biggest thing you're probably missing is capital. And so what you're doing with Wayra is definitely meeting the gap there. But that, I think we now see you can build a great startup anywhere in the world now. And yes, Silicon Valley is going to be still a very, very important part of that. But we're seeing great companies around the world. And so to the entrepreneurs that are here today, good luck. Thank you for letting me come and talk and share a few thoughts with you.